Y'all come in and sit down. We gotta talk. They're saying Diddy is about to go broke. Now let's talk about it, y'all. Diddy thought he dodged the big one. No sex trafficking conviction. No RICO convent conviction. Just about 2 men at conventions, and this man thought he was just going tiptoe out the door with some bail. Now listen, Judge Aaron told him to sit down before he sits them down. But y'all, let's actually talk about how Diddy forgot one thing. The civil cases. And now Jane Doe, the escorts, and every person who's ever got flown out under pressure just got a legal cheat code and they're coming straight for his money. Y'all, let's get into this, because all I gotta say is, baby, we love to see it. Now, first of all, I want everybody on the internet to understand what Diddy was actually convicted of and why it's a civil lawsuit gold marine. All right, so let's get into it, because this part matters more than people, and the Diddy supporters realize. A lot of folks heard Mann Act and thought it was some dusty technical law. Now, I'm not gonna lie, it is dope. It is rooted in racism, white slavery. However, over the years, it evolved and is one now the most powerful tools that prosecutors use in sex trafficking. All right, y'all, got that? Now let's get into this. All right, so the Mann Act now is a federal sex crime statute. And baby, it has teeth. It carries prison time up to 20 years. And if you plead guilty or you're convicted, that stays on your record for life. Now baby, Diddy was convicted. So what exactly was Diddy convicted of? Under U.S. Code 2421, the Mann Act makes it a federal felony to knowingly transport a person across state lines for the purposes of illegal sexual activity. Whether that's prostitutes or coercive sexual arrangements that violate state or federal DL law. Now let's break this down legally, because I need for people in the back to hear this. Knowingly means it wasn't accidental. You booked the flights, you arranged the hotel, you knew what was going to happen. For illegal sexual activity includes sex under coercion, fraud, drugs, manipulation, or exploitation, not just formal prostitution. And crossing state lines turns it into a federal offense, not just a local scandal. And that's exactly what federal prosecutors alleged that he did multiple times over multiple years to multiple women and the escorts. So even if the charges were sealed, okay? And even if he didn't serve time, which they are not sealed, and he is going to serve time, a conviction, or guilty plea under the Mann Act, means the federal government proved beyond a reasonable doubt that he uses power, wealth, and transportation access to commit sex crimes. Maybe let that sit in. No, literally let it. Okay, now let's see. Now here's why the conviction is a civil lawsuit jackpot. It removes the burden of proof for future plaintiffs. That's right. Jane Doe and the escorts don't need to prove that Diddy intended to exploit them across state lines. All they have to do is show up and say, Yana, here's his federal conviction. He's already been found guilty of doing this exact thing. They don't need him to be convicted of sex trafficking. They only need to show by a preponderance of the evidence that it's more likely than not that he harmed them. A Mann Act conviction is like a neon sign for the judge saying, this man has done this before. This isn't theoretical. The Mann Act makes him legally vulnerable, even without jail time. Because let's be clear, Diddy may be able to avoid a lengthy prison sentence, but legally, he's now a convicted SMOX offender under federal law. That's admissible. That's powerful. And in a civil court, baby, that's money. The survivors don't need to prove consent was absent. They don't need to prove, oh, I didn't consent, I didn't want it. They don't have to sit up in front of those juries and listen to them watch all their horrors and being like, nah, you wanted it. The law has already said it didn't matter. Because under the Mann Act, consent isn't valid if the sexual activity involved fraud, manipulation, or abuse of power. So when people say, well, they agreed to go, the court has already decided. The agreement was not legally valid. You cannot legally agree to let somebody exploit you like that. Now here's the translation for the timeline and the people in the back. Diddy just didn't take a PR hit, y'all. He was legally branded as someone who exploits women using power, travel, and coercion. Even if he never wears an orange jumpsuit, and he will. Even the best estimate, Mark Aragos, has him as a year. His money is now on the table and the bill is coming due. But y'all, let's also focus on the civil fallout. Okay, how this one? Well, actually, these 2 convictions opened the lawsuit floodgates. Diddy's Mann convention didn't close that chapter. It cracked the safe open. Because now, well, actually, yeah, now that Diddy's been formally convicted of a federal sex crime. What's that mean? Take a guess. Every person who has ever been flown out, locked down, coerced, rugged, assaulted, manipulated, or just controlled by this man in a spectral context. Baby, they have legal ammo. Who are we talking about? Jane Doe, the escorts, any background dancers, industry girlfriends, paid for plus ones. I'm just saying, and did he pay for their time, not their body? And the ones who were told this is how it works, get used to it. And anyone who had to play alone to survive now, thanks to collateral, estoppel, a legal term. Diddy can't just show up in court and say, I didn't do that, because the federal government already said yes. Yes, you did, in fact, do that. The Mann Act conviction means every survivor's legal team gets to skip step one. They don't have to prove if he's guilty. They get to focus on how much he owes. And baby, of course, this is about money, not prison. But again, don't let people screw you with the okie, okay? Don't let people screw you with the okie. Okie. Of oh no, why are you doing civil? You just want money. Hell yeah, run that fool's pockets up. Because without that money, these people wouldn't be on their hands and knees begging for pennies, doing his evil work, all right? This is about money, not prison. The criminal court gave us the label. The civil court is going to send the invoice. Under the Trafficking Victims Protection Act and the related civil statutes, these survivors can now sue for pain and suffering, psychological trauma, emotional distress, loss of income, punitive damage, attorney's fees, and lifetime therapy costs. And those numbers add up fast. If one woman wins a $5 million judgment, that sets a precedence for the next and the next and the next. And this is how predators lose everything after the verdict. Diddy is now one mistake away from losing it all forever. And baby, we love to see it. And here, because you guys, I don't care. Listen, this is a point of discourse, but even a fool can see that right now. And by fools, I mean everybody but his supporters outside can see that. Now that there's a federal conviction on record, Diddy can never afford another mistake. If another Jane comes forward tomorrow, if he loses his temper in a hotel suite, if a party gets filmed, if a former assistant comes clean, or if an escort feels emboldened, baby Diddy is done. Because that one new lawsuit, that lawyer just walks in with the Mann Act paperwork and says, look at the pattern. He did this before, he's doing it again. The judge doesn't need a full trial. The judge doesn't need to guess. They already know who he is, and this time he can't claim innocence. He already signed that away. Baby, this is the final word on this fallout. Day 5 of the Diddy trial. Diddy trial verdict. Fallout, I guess. Did he thought that literally only being convicted of those 2 counts could save his empire? But what he really did was hand every survivor the legal weapon they were missing. He thought it was over. But the truth is that signature under the Mann Act just made it open season for his life. Again, I want you guys to know he pleaded guilty on 2 counts. And it's not even what he pleaded guilty for. It's what he admitted on the record. Mark Ignapiello admitted he was very violent, admitted he did all those horrible things. That's why he got denied bail. Everything he admitted in that court can be used in a civil. Baby, again, the Mann Act blew the door open. And get this, the feds might not be done. The Mann Act wasn't just a slap on the wrist. It was a wedge, a crack in the dam. And now the water is rushing in civilly and perhaps even criminally. Let's be clear. When the federal court convicts you under the Mann Act, you don't just
and no
lose
longer
reputation.
has a voice who will pursue justice for her
protection.
accusation.
How? Well, how about this?
As of the
First,
against Diddy,
the civil
no
floodgates
expansion
are
of the
wide
investigation,
open. Every woman
no
who
isolation
thought,
orders,
well, I
no
can't
equipment
sue,
access,
no one would believe
no
me.
suspension of
Now
attorney
has something
communication.
powerful in their corner.
Everything
A federal
inside solitary
conviction
block C
confirming this
continued as
man used
before.
SMMETs,
Everything except
power
the
and
fear.
interstate travel
If a
to
female
exploit
warden
women.
can
This is
vanish
the
after a
legal
single
equivalent
note, thing except
of
the
blood
fear.
in the water.
If a female
And that
warden
sharks
can
are
vanish
circling
after a
with
single
lawsuits,
note, ones who
lawyers,
once worked overnight
and
in that
trauma
area,
timelines.
the ones who
And the
filed for
Trafficking
leave
Victims
without giving a
Protecting
reason,
Act.
the ones
That's
who
a
saw
TV
but
which
never
works
spoke.
hand in hand
No
with
one
the Mann
mentions
Act.
the note,
Gives survivors
but everyone
up to
knows
10
it
years from the
appeared.
date of discovery
And if what it says is true,
to file civil
then
claims for
Part
coerce,
3. The
drug
person
fuel
no longer in the
manipulation,
system. The
emotional
internal
and
personnel
psychological
database
abuse,
of the Atlanta
commercial
Federal Detention Center
exploitation,
updated
and
its
anything
weekly
tied
roster
to a pattern
under
of
the
grooming
category
and
Special
trafficking. And the
Personnel
best
Code
part
Adjustment.
is,
The
They don't
name
need
of
a new
Warden
conviction.
TD was
They
marked
just
as
need to
removed
say,
from
"This
system by
happened to me
administrative
too,"
order.
and it
There was no
matches
decision number
what he's already
recorded,
been
but was
convicted of.
deactivated.
This is copy and
Her
paste
personal
civil
contact
court
information
gold. But here's the
disappeared from
cold
the
truth.
internal
He's not
network
safe
exactly
criminally.
36 hours
And this is the
after
one
she
thing
filed
these
her
Diddy
complaint.
supporters
The changelog
don't want
was
to admit.
executed
Diddy
from the
thinks this
system's
man
highest
at convention
access level server,
conviction
a device bearing
was
the
the end of it.
identifier
A sealed deal,
DCCA1,
a quiet
located in the
close.
coordination
But that's not
office
how
on the
feds
fourth
play
floor
the
of the
long
Security
game. Let's look at
Administration
the R.
wing.
Kelly blueprint.
Only
First
2
case,
individuals possess the
acquitted.
authority
Second,
to perform a system-level
mistrial. Third,
personnel removal at
media
that tier,
circus.
the head
No
of Federal
charges.
Human
Fourth
Resources
swing.
and Detention
Boom.
Center.
Federal trafficking
No
conviction.
confirmation
Decades
exists
behind
and
bars.
was made.
The DOJ took
The removal
4
of
tries
Warden
to build a
TD's
perfect
name
criminal
was not
case.
accompanied
And when
by
they
any
hit,
or protective
baby,
reassessment.
they hit hard. Same with
At 11:20
Epstein. Same
a.m.,
with
a printed
Weinstein.
copy of the
Pattern
personnel
cases take
deployment
time.
chart was
And now the
generated
Mann
in
Act
preparation
conviction.
for the new
The
week's
two of
schedule.
them has
Under
done
the
2
section
dangerous
marked
things
Internal
for Diddy.
Alert,
It preserved
TD's
criminal
name
liability because if any new victim steps forward with a fresh federal violation, or if any past violations falls within the statute of limitations, the feds can reopen an investigation with and file new charges. And this time they bring the pattern, and they might still get the RICO. Now I know what you're saying. Double jeopardy. They can never try him for RICO again. Yes, for the trafficking of Cassie and Jane, but for anybody else, still open season. So again, like I said, let's just say, did he lose his temper again, like he allegedly did with Jane? Let's say the former employee hands over those rumored videos. Let's say someone flips a driver, a manager, a fix. If one more credible case lands on a prosecutor's desk, Diddy is not just writing checks. He's doing time. Diddy is in a holding pattern, y'all. One step from collapse. Now, right now, again, this is dangerous legal limbo. The feds have enough to expose him. The civil suits are lining up to bankrupt him. One more misstep, and he is R. Kelly too. He doesn't even have to assault anyone new. If a case from 2016-17 surfaces and falls within the 10-year window, he could be charged under the same law he just literally got convicted of. But this time it's going to be worse. And because he's already a convicted sex offender, the next jury won't be asking if, they'll be asking how many years. Baby Diddy tried to close the door with a sealed deal, but what he really did was leave it unlocked and light a fire on the way out. Civilly, he's vulnerable. Criminally, he's on probation, without papers. Financially, the invoices are coming. Baby, one misstep, one more Jane, one more temper tantrum. And the government that let him slide this, I'm sorry, not the government. The jury that let him slide this time. Baby, they will swing again. And next time, they're saying they might not miss. Ooh, baby, this is some heavy stuff. What do y'all think about this? Because at the end of the day, Jane's case is just a start. Jane Doe may potentially file suit again. If she did, it would outline rugging, rape, psychological control, and exploitation across multiple states, the exact blueprint for the Mann Act charge. And because Diddy has already pled guilty to similar behavior, her legal team has momentum. But what happens when the escorts file? What happens when a second Jane Doe, if they exist, steps forward, or a third, or a fourth, or a fifth? If even one wins a multi-million-dollar verdict, the rest will follow. This isn't a gossip headline anymore. It's mass tort territory. You guys keep this in mind, okay? And I want everybody to know this, and just keep hope alive, because the universe always bends to the arc of truth, okay? Again, keep it in mind. Let's end this with a little hope and a little heat, because if you've been watching this and thinking, where's the justice? Baby, you're not alone. Diddy I don't think justice was served yet. There's whispers of charges in California, maybe New York, maybe federal RICO, and maybe they'll file, or maybe they won't. But I'm going to tell you what I do know, and what I do think. Justice doesn't always come in a form of a courtroom. Sometimes it shows up in a mirror. And Diddy is a man who survived off control, intimidation, manipulation for over 2 decades. That's not just strategy, that's identity. And now that identity is under threat, Diddy is no longer in control. He's being watched, he's being whispered about, he's being laughed at, he's being outed in court records, sealed deals, and public opinion. And a man like Diddy, baby, He doesn't collapse quietly. And lastly, that brings us to the real danger. Diddy's own nature. See, the most dangerous thing about Diddy isn't what's been proven. It's what he still believes he can get away with. And that's why, whether or not charges are ever filed again, he's going to make a mistake. Because Diddy can't help. But Diddy, he can't stand being humiliated. He can't sit still. He can't stop asserting power even when the world is saying stop. So when you ask where justice is, it might not be in a jury verdict. It might not come from the FBI. And it might not come from California or New York. It might come from Diddy's own hand. From the one bad night where he can't contain himself. From the next Jane he underestimates. From the next phone he gets to destroy. From a fixer who's had enough. Or from the escorts that have jet lag. And they're mad. He flew them out on Southwest Spirit Airlines. Baby, a reckoning is coming, and it's bigger than the courtroom. This is bigger than one trial. This is about power. This is about silence. This is about what happens when you spend 20 years playing God and thinking the world won't bite you back. So for every survivor, every viewer, every person who felt like they were losing hope, don't, because justice isn't always loud, but it is patient, and it doesn't need a press release to hit. Sometimes the biggest fall comes not when the system stops you, but when your own ego drives you into the fire. And baby, Diddy is already holding that match. Anyway, y'all let me know what you think in the comments. I will talk to y'all later.